The sweat was stinging my eyes, baking in the 110-degree heat of the Phoenix equipment yard when my phone vibrated in my pocket. One glance at the screen stopped my breath. A high-priority anti-money laundering alert from my commercial bank. A wire withdrawal for $100,000 was actively processing on my corporate line of credit. I had not authorized a single loan. My thumb slammed the deny button. I dialed the fraud department right there. Standing in the suffocating dirt, the agent on the line dropped the anvil. A power of attorney had been submitted the previous afternoon. It was digitally signed, notarized, and entirely ironclad on paper. It authorized two people full and unrestricted access to my corporate funds. My mother, Donna, and my brother, Brandon. The blazing heat of the Arizona sun vanished. My blood turned to absolute ice. I climbed into the cab of my truck, the air conditioning blasting against my face, and stared at the steering wheel. I am 32 years old, and my name is Megan Brooks. I own a commercial landscaping and contracting firm that spans half the state. I built this empire with dirt under my fingernails, calluses on my palms, and a relentless refusal to fail. And the people who just tried to steal it from me were the same people who spent my entire life treating me like a ghost. Leaning my head back against the seat, the memories flooded the cabin. I remembered eating 50-cent instant noodles in a studio apartment with no heating, desperately saving every dime to buy a rusted secondhand work truck to start my business. While I was scraping rust and changing my own oil in the dark, my parents were buying Brandon a 4-bedroom house in cash. They handed him the deed tied with a literal ribbon just to stroke his fragile ego. Brandon was their golden boy. He floated from one failed consulting gig to the next, playing the victim, complaining about the stress of being the eldest child, while my parents bailed him out of every credit card debt he ever racked up. They looked down on the dirt on my boots back then. They viewed my independence as an insult. They never realized that the dirt was building an empire they would eventually try to steal. I drove straight to my parents' house, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. When I pulled onto their quiet suburban street, I saw it immediately, parked in their driveway, gleaming in the afternoon sun. Was a brand new luxury European sedan, Brandon's new toy. He'd already bought it on credit, banking on my $100,000 clearing his account by the end of the day. I put my truck in park, staring at the front door. I remembered all the times my father, Arthur, stood by in cowardly silence while my mother gaslit me into believing I was the accident of the family. I realized then that this was not a misunderstanding. This was not a desperate plea for help. This was a calculated, orchestrated heist. I swallowed the lump in my throat and shifted the truck back into drive. I refused to knock. I refused to scream. The emotional shock evaporated, replaced by the cold, mechanical precision of a chief executive neutralizing a hostile threat. I drove straight to the downtown office of my corporate attorney, Yulia. We bypassed every ounce of legal red tape and pulled the bank records instantly. Julia slid a printed copy of the forged power of attorney across her mahogany desk. The signature was a terrifyingly perfect match. My mother had not just guessed a password or hacked an email. She had actively stolen my old corporate tax returns and an expired driver's license from a lockbox I left in my childhood bedroom a decade ago. Furthermore, the document was rubber-stamped by a mobile notary. A quick background check revealed the notary was a woman who played tennis with my mother and owed a massive, crippling gambling debt. The crime was meticulously premeditated. While I was staring at the forged signature, my cell phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice came through the speaker aggressively cheerful. dripping with toxic sweetness. She invited me to a lavish dinner at their exclusive Phoenix Country Club that evening. She said they wanted to celebrate the family's new wealth. Before hanging up, she dropped a passive-aggressive threat, implying that I owed my brother this money because his childhood stress had paved the way for my independence. As soon as the call ended, my lawyer pulled up Brandon's social media. He had just posted a smug photo holding a crystal glass of champagne. The caption read, "Big moves coming," with the hashtag vice president. Staring at that photo, the psychology of his disease became glaringly obvious. Brandon was not just greedy. His ego was fundamentally shattered. He had failed at everything he ever touched. Claiming my wealth was his only survival mechanism. It was the only way he could avoid the crushing reality that the forgotten scapegoat sister had vastly outperformed him in every conceivable metric. I looked at Julia and told her to finalize the legal dossier. I accepted the dinner invitation. The trap was officially set, but my mother was far more vicious than I anticipated. Before I even left the lawyer's office, the bank called again. Realizing the $100,000 wire had been blocked, my mother escalated the war. She attempted to use the forged power of attorney to freeze my primary operational accounts. She told the bank manager that I was suffering a mental breakdown and was legally unfit to manage my own company. The stakes turned instantly lethal. She was actively trying to bankrupt my payroll and destroy my livelihood. I locked down every single account with verbal passcodes and took the irrefutable evidence directly to the Financial Crimes Unit of the Phoenix Police Department. I handed the lead detective the stolen tax returns, the identity theft logs, and the proof of the corrupt notary. Because the attempted theft was $100,000, it was a high-level felony. That evening, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror and dressed for the execution. I slipped on a tailored blazer, reflecting on how many times I had sat at family dinners feeling invisible, belittled, and small. I looked at my own reflection and realized I was no longer that terrified girl desperately seeking their validation. I was the predator now. I texted the lead detective the address of the country club and grabbed my keys. I arrived at the opulent, chandelier-lit private dining room of the club. My parents were seated at the head of a massive table, surrounded by their high society friends. Brandon was wearing a tailored suit he had clearly bought on credit, grinning like a lottery winner. My mother clinked her crystal glass with a silver spoon, standing up to address the wealthy crowd. She announced to the room that Brandon was officially joining my company as the vice president of wealth management, and that our family was finally uniting our assets. The crowd offered polite, golf clap applause. I stood up. The room quieted down. I walked calmly down the length of the table, pulling a thick manila envelope from my leather bag. I dropped a massive civil lawsuit for fraud and forgery directly onto my mother's prime rib plate. The heavy thud of the paper echoed in the silent room. My mother scoffed, her face twisting into a mask of disgust. She called me an ungrateful brat, screaming that Brandon deserved that money, that I owed this family for the roof they put over my head 20 years ago. I leaned in close, resting my hands on the table, and whispered so only she could hear. I told her that Julia had sent the police to her notary friend's house an hour ago, and that the woman was already singing like a canary to avoid prison. I stepped back just as the heavy oak doors of the dining room swung open. Two plainclothes financial crimes detectives walked straight toward our table. The entire room went dead silent. The sound of silverware hitting plates stopped completely. The narrative of my mother's perfect life shattered as the detectives read Donna and Brandon their Miranda rights in front of all their wealthy friends. The blood drained from my mother's face, leaving her pale and trembling. The click of the steel handcuffs locking around Brandon's wrists echoed beautifully off the high ceilings. Brandon literally fell to his knees, his expensive suit wrinkling against the carpet. He began weeping openly, begging me to tell the police it was a joke, pleading for me to stop it. I looked down at the golden child, my voice steady and cold. I told him that I audit my own massive company every single quarter and asked him why he ever thought I would not audit my own mother. I turned on my heel and walked out of the dining room, leaving them to be paraded in handcuffs through the crowded country club lobby. A week later, my father drained every penny of his retirement savings to post Brandon's massive bail. But the humiliation and the impending federal trial completely broke Brandon's fragile mind. Desperate, with absolutely no money left to hire a federal defense attorney, Brandon decided his only way out was to bankrupt me, so I would be forced to drop the civil suit. He violated his felony bail conditions by taking a pair of bolt cutters and severing his government-issued tracking monitor. At 2 o'clock in the morning, driven by pure narcissistic rage, he drove to my Phoenix equipment yard with 2 heavy gallons of gasoline. He punched in an old consulting gate code he had memorized years ago, sneaking into the dark dirt lot, planning to torch my entire fleet of expensive commercial trucks. But I was light years ahead of him. When I upgraded my security systems months prior, I intentionally left his specific gate code active, but I secretly tied it to a silent alarm. The exact second he stepped onto the property, he legally established forced entry. As he unscrewed the cap on the gasoline, massive stadium floodlights snapped on, blinding him. My private armed security guards racked their shotguns, ordering him to the dirt at gunpoint. Because he had cut his ankle monitor, the police dispatch was already active, and patrol cars swarmed the yard within 3 minutes. The ultimate checkmate was that he was risking 20 years in prison for nothing. I had already relocated my primary multi-million-dollar fleet to a climate-controlled indoor warehouse across town. The trucks sitting in that dirt yard were decommissioned, fully depreciated junkers waiting to be sold for scrap metal. Brandon was arrested on the spot for felony arson and commercial sabotage. The fallout was swift, legal, and merciless. Because Brandon caused a hazardous materials response on my commercial property, my corporate attorneys immediately placed a formal legal lien on his house. Since my parents had bought that house in cash, it was a free and clear asset. With my parents entirely bankrupt from their legal fees and Brandon locked in a state penitentiary, they defaulted on the property taxes. Months later, I bought the golden child's prized home at a county tax auction for absolute pennies on the dollar. I forced the sale, evicted their memories, and used the equity to buy a brand new commercial bulldozer, which I painted bright yellow, the only family member who ever supported me. My Aunt Sarah was promoted to manage my new regional office. My toxic bloodline was permanently erased from my life. Sitting here now, in the quiet peace of my own home. The silence is beautiful. I want to break the wall between us for a moment and speak directly to you, because I know exactly how much it hurts to realize the people who were supposed to love you the most are actually your greatest enemies. The dynamic of the golden child and the scapegoat is a psychological prison. My parents never actually loved Brandon. They used him as an extension of their own fragile egos. They propped him up because his dependence made them feel powerful. And they hated me because my independence exposed their utter mediocrity. Every time I succeeded, it held up a mirror to their failures. And they wanted to smash the mirror. Grieving a toxic family is the hardest thing you will ever do. But you have to understand that you are not mourning the people they actually were. You are mourning the parents you deserved. The parents you wished you had, but who never truly existed. Letting go of that ghost is the only way you will ever survive. I learned 3 brutal life rules through this fire, and I want you to write them down. Rule number 1, blood does not make you family, respect does. Loyalty is earned through consistent actions, not demanded through the sheer coincidence of a birth certificate. If a stranger treated you the way your family treats you, you would have called the police years ago. Do not lower your boundaries just because you share a last name. Rule number 2, narcissists do not want an apology. They want your total surrender. You cannot outlove, outcompromise, or outcommunicate someone who views your boundaries as an insult to their very existence. They will drain you of your finances, your sanity, and your joy, and then blame you for being empty. Rule number 3, your success is your absolute ultimate armor. Keep your finances entirely silent. Keep your next moves calculated and quiet. And never, ever let guilt trick you into funding your own abusers. Your money is a tool for your freedom, not a bandage for their incompetence. We spend so much of our precious lives shrinking ourselves down so our toxic family members can feel big. We dim our own lights so we do not blind them. But what happens the day you finally decide to stand up to your full height? What happens when you stop apologizing for your own strength? Tell me down in the comments. What was the exact moment you realized your toxic family did not deserve a seat at your table anymore? Share your story. And share this video with someone who desperately needs the courage to change the locks on their door tonight. I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. You are sitting there, shaking your head, wondering how someone as smart and successful as Megan could let her family get that close to her finances in the first place. Why didn't she cut them off years ago when they were ignoring her struggles and buying her brother a house? Why do smart people stay in toxic family dynamics for so long? Let me decode the psychology behind this. Because Megan was not stupid. She was caught in something psychologists call the slot machine effect, or intermittent reinforcement. When you grow up in a toxic family, they do not abuse you 100% of the time. If they did, you would walk away immediately. Instead, they give you tiny, unpredictable crumbs of hope, a rare compliment, a decent holiday dinner, a moment where they actually ask about your day. Your brain becomes addicted to waiting for that next crumb, hoping that if you just work a little harder, become a little richer, or stay quiet enough, you will finally win the jackpot of their unconditional love. Megan was not waiting for an apology. She was trapped in the desperate childhood hope that they would eventually see her worth. The moment she saw that forged signature, the slot machine broke, and she finally woke up. Now, let us talk about the street smart financial defense Megan deployed, because her reaction was a masterclass in protecting your assets. She executed what I call the audit strategy. When confronted with emotional manipulation, scammers and toxic families want you to react with anger. They want you to scream and cry because emotion makes you careless. Megan did the exact opposite. She shut down her emotions and looked at the paper trail. By going straight to the corporate attorney and the financial crimes unit, she removed the family drama and treated it purely as a business threat. Scammers absolutely hate details. They hate timestamps. They hate notarized logs. And they hate police reports. She also executed the perfect buyout by letting the legal system place a lien on her brother's house and buying it at a tax auction. She did not just take revenge. She legally recovered her financial security and severed their ability to ever use that asset against her again. She documented everything, built an ironclad case in silence, and let the authorities drop the hammer. The greatest lesson here is about your own self-worth. You are allowed to walk away from people who hurt you. Even if you share a last name, trust is earned through respect, not owed through biology. If your family treats your boundaries like a challenge, They do not see you as a person. They see you as a resource. Stop funding the people who want to see you fail. Protect your peace. Lock down your assets. And remember that the best revenge is a massive, untouchable success. Let me know in the comments if you have ever had to financially cut off a toxic relative. And make sure you subscribe if you want to keep building your psychological armor. You are worth protecting. I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. You are sitting there asking yourself, why did she even accept that country club invitation? Why didn't Megan just cut them out the minute she started making real money? How does a smart CEO let her family get that close to her finances in the first place? Let me decode the psychology behind this. Because Megan was not stupid. She was trapped in something called the slot machine effect, or intermittent reinforcement. When you grow up in a toxic family system, they do not abuse you 100% of the time. If they did, you would walk away immediately. Instead, they give you tiny, unpredictable crumbs of hope, a rare compliment, a decent holiday dinner, a passing moment where they actually acknowledge your hard work. Your brain becomes addicted to pulling the lever, hoping that if you just become a little more successful or stay quiet enough, you will finally hit the jackpot of their unconditional love. Megan was not waiting for an apology. She was addicted to those crumbs. But the moment she saw that forged power of attorney, the slot machine broke and the illusion was shattered. Now, let us talk about the street smart financial defense Megan deployed, because her reaction is an absolute masterclass in protecting your assets. First, she used the audit strategy. When confronted with betrayal, scammers and toxic relatives want you to react with explosive anger. They want you to scream and cry because emotional people make careless mistakes. Megan did the exact opposite. She shut down her emotions and went straight to the financial crimes unit. She pulled the notary logs, the bank alerts, and the identity theft records. Scammers absolutely hate details. By treating her own family like a hostile corporate threat, she removed the drama and let the paper trail do the talking. Second, she focused on building the case. Notice how she did not confront her brother at the equipment yard to yell at him. She let him trip the silent alarm. She let him establish forced entry and violate his felony bail conditions, allowing the authorities to catch him red-handed. She built an ironclad, undeniable case in absolute silence, completely removing her own liability. Finally, she executed the buyout. When Megan's attorneys placed a legal lien on her brother's house, and she later bought it at the county tax auction, she did not just take revenge. She executed a permanent financial severance. She legally recovered her restitution and stripped them of the very asset they used to make her feel inferior for years. She invested in her own total freedom. The ultimate verdict here is about your own self-worth. You are entirely allowed to walk away from people who continuously hurt you, even if you share a last name. Trust is earned through mutual respect. It is never owed through biology. If your family treats your boundaries like a negotiation, they do not see you as a person. They see you as a resource. Stop funding the people who want to see you fail. Protect your peace. Lock down your assets. And remember that the best revenge is a massive, untouchable success. Tell me down in the comments if you have ever had to financially cut off a toxic relative. And make sure you hit subscribe so you can keep building your psychological armor. You are worth protecting.